Okay, thank you. As I was saying before, we were live on YouTube. We were going to pipe in the presidential debate tonight, but we decided we'd just hold our own drama. I call out of recess Lee County Zoning Board of Appeals hearing on petition number 20P 1555, Stewart Creek Solar LLC's petition for special use permit to construct a solar energy system in portions of Alto and Willow Creek townships here in Lee County. I note that calling back into recess, we have the presence of the in-person presence of all 5 zoning members of the Board of Appeals, Mr. Forster, Mr. Burrow, Mr. Bothy, Mr. Pratt, and Mr. Hughes. Didn't look to see if Mr. Myers, no? Okay, Mr. Myers is not on Zoom. The wonderful zoning officer, Dee Duffy, is present, as is the astute state's attorney, Mr. Boonstra. Ms. Kennedy is here representing the petitioner, along with, I think there's 3 of her representatives in the space today. Representative of the Lee County IT is present, and we thank them for their ongoing expertise, allowing lots of folks to participate remotely. Alice Henkel, running the system, is present. Our ever-suffering court reporter is present. Interested parties, let's see, I count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, I think. 6 interested parties are present. So we meet the maximum requirements. We would have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 12. I think we have 21 people present. There are no persons in the rear jury room or on the first floor lobby. Is that correct, Ms. Duffy? Okay, thank you. As I repeat at the beginning of each session, the Zoom meeting ID is 915-3923-9154. The password is 209840. If you wish to view the proceedings, listen and view to the proceedings on YouTube, you go to www.youtube.com, type in Lee County IL, as in IL for Illinois, Zoning Board of Appeals. No need to be concerned with upper or lowercase letters. There'll be a search bar appearing, asking you to input the session date. If that's today, it's obviously 10/22/2020. And voila, you should be able to see and hear us. If you have difficulties with any of these things, you may certainly call Ms. Duffy's technical assistance line, 815-973-3449. At this point, before we begin, I ask everyone to turn their cell phones off or at least to silent during the duration of the proceedings. The last thing I have to say is unscripted, and it will affect the proceedings going forward. And we all don't know for how long, obviously. The governor of the state of Illinois has raised in our area, Region 1, the restriction levels. Starting Sunday, gatherings can be no larger than 10 people. We will be struggling over our next session is not scheduled until, well, we will schedule it for November 4th. During the interim, we'll be working on trying to figure out how to keep the attendance in this room down to 10. And if we're going to utilize, obviously we'll utilize Zoom and YouTube outside of this old Lee County courthouse. Whether we're able to utilize it in other rooms in here, we'll be discussing. But I just want to advise everybody that I'm quite sure that 10 necessary parties will take up any available spaces in here. So any other spaces will have to be remote. Hopefully maybe some in the old courthouse, but a lot will be at home or your businesses or your friends' houses. Okay, enough chatter. When we left off, you were in the middle of producing your evidence, Ms. Kennedy, and you may continue.
Thank you, Judge. I'd like to call Wendy Ryerson.
Okay, Ms. Ryerson, you want to step up and raise your right hand, please? Just find a space you feel comfortable. Sure. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Right up next to me, and I'll move away from you if that makes you feel more comfortable. And then I'm sure Ms. Kennedy has some questions of you. And Ms. Kennedy, you may inquire.
Thank you, Judge. Could you please state your name and spell it for the record?
Wendy Ryerson, last name spelled R-Y-E-R-S-O-N, first name W-E-N-D-Y.
Thank you. And could you tell us a little bit about your educational background?
Specific to my role here tonight and my job responsibilities, I have the Certified Illinois Assessing Official designation.
And how are you presently employed?
I am the Chief County Assessment Officer, which abbreviated is County Assessor.
And how long have you been in that position?
20 years.
And what are your job duties?
I oversee one of the three parts for the property tax cycle, being the assessment or valuation portion of the property tax cycle.
And are you familiar with solar energy systems?
I am.
How so?
I served on a statewide committee of my colleagues. We developed and proposed the current statewide standard for the solar energy in the state of Illinois. And of course, I field the occasional phone call with regard to how to apply that statewide standard and what the impact of that statewide standard would be to taxing districts or taxpayers.
And are you familiar with Stewart Creek Solar LLC?
I am.
And are you aware that it's a proposed 600 megawatt solar farm on roughly 5,000 acres?
That's my understanding, correct.
Now, did the company provide you with certain information regarding this project?
They did. They specifically provided me with an Excel file with the estimate of the taxes, projected taxes, and asked that I would review that for accuracy.
And have you had an opportunity to review that information and run your own calculations?
I did.
Over the 35-year period that the solar farm will be in operation, according to your figures, how much will be generated in property taxes?
Between 80 and $81 million over the 35-year course.
And with certain development that comes into the county, specifically solar energy systems, is there a concern about what's called a shifting burden?
Yes, I've been fielding some questions regarding what is being referred to as a shifting burden. To clarify, the shifting burden is the concept is any time that a single property or a class of property shifts burden from that single property or that class of property to another class or individual property payer.
And how does that happen?
Well, to give you an example of that, on a very high, broad level, if the General Assembly, state of Illinois said, you know what, we're going to reduce farmland assessments by 50%. At a very high level, I think everybody can understand that if farmers suddenly pay 50% less, who's going to pick up the remainder of that tax burden? Because taxing districts still need the same amount of money to operate. So who would pick that burden up? Well, it would be shifted to the other property taxpayers, or the other classes of property, such as residential, commercial, or industrial property.
And with respect to this project, the Stewart Creek Solar Project, do you, in your position as the Lee County Assessor, have any concerns about there being a shifting burden to the taxpayers of Lee County?
Not in this particular case, not based on my analysis. The shifting burden mechanically or mathematically happens when, in the example I gave you a minute ago, the farmland is reduced. When farmland or a class of property goes down, what happens? The tax rate goes up to capture the same amount of money. And in this particular case, the two school districts that will receive the primary amount of money or the primary benefactor from this particular proposed project would be Stewart Elementary and Rochelle High School. Both of those taxing districts are at their already statutory maximum rate limits. So again, mechanically or mathematically, the way that burden gets shifted is the tax rate goes up. But in this case, with these two school districts, they're already at the statutory rate cap. So in this particular case, what's going to happen here is as Stewart Creek, the project is depreciated over time, which is what happens with solar energy. Instead of shifting the burden to other taxpayers by increasing the rate, this rate can't increase because it's already at its maximum. So what's going to happen is these school districts are just going to end up taking in less money from year over year because of the depreciation. So it can't be shifted to the others because that rate is already at its maximum rate.
Ms. Ryerson, is the company paying you to be here tonight to testify?
No.
I have nothing further, Your Honor.
All right. Questions of Ms. Ryerson, Mr. Boonstra? Thank you. Ms. Duffy? Okay. Members of the board, Mr. Hughes?
Yes. Ms. Ryerson, what is, I believe that there is a base depreciation, even though it's extended over the 35 years, the depreciation can only go down to a certain level and then is maintained for tax purposes. What's that base level?
I'm going to take that just a little bit broader than your specific question. So
Okay.
the formula, the statewide standard that was adopted calls for a appreciation based on the consumer price index to be applied each year. And yes, a depreciation based on 4% per year. That same statewide standard said that depreciation will only go down to a floor of 30%. After that period of time, it takes us, by the way, at 4% per year, it's going to take us about 17 and a half years to get to the floor. After that period of time, the appreciation is going to continue to be applied, but the depreciation will not be any more applied. It'll remain at the maximum of 70%, floor of 30%.
That's all I have.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Forster? Mr. Burrow?
Ryerson, then, can you briefly explain the difference in the
Mike?
need the mic? Yeah. Can you briefly explain the difference in the process or what between the wind energy systems and the solar and why they were differentiated?
Actually, the process, the statewide standard is almost identical between wind energy and solar energy. Wind also has a 4% depreciation per year with that floor of 30%. It also has an appreciation factor that gets applied each year. So the only difference is the base per megawatt price for solar started out at 218,000 and wind started out at 360,000. Of course, each year appreciation has been added on to that, but that was the base.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Bothy? Mr. Pratt?
Yes, I got a couple here. So these two school districts, they're going to get an increase in revenue when this goes online.
Correct.
So they could lower the tax rate to the rest of the residents.
They could. That's a choice that's left up to the school district, but yeah.
That's a shifting burden, correct?
Clarify. I'm not sure I'm following you.
They're shifting the burden from the local people to the asset.
That's correct. In that particular case, if they reduced the request that they made, it would shift the burden onto the project and away from other property owners. Is that what you're?
Correct.
Okay, all right. I wasn't following you at first.
Right. So, well, I can't make an opinion, I guess. No further questions. Jeff.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Meyer still not on? Okay. All right. Interested parties, first in the room by raise of your hand, questions of Ms. Ryerson. Mr. Luz, go ahead and find one of the microphones on the middle aisle. And it's a new night, so please state your name and your community.
Yes, Adam Luz from near Eldina. Thank you for being here. I appreciate it. I've got a few questions. As it pertains to assessing a home, when you assess a home, does viewshed play a role in the assessed rate of the home potentially?
Because in the assessment world, we need to value a lot of properties in a short amount of time. We use a software program to do that. And so in the initial wave, that software program isn't looking at view shed, because that would take an individual standing out in front of a house and saying, what's this view versus the next view? Where it does come into play, or could come into play, is that if a property owner were to file an appeal. So we've done the mass reassessment, we've sent out assessment notices. Someone were to file an appeal and say, I'm looking at this, and I believe it affects my property values, then it might be a topic of conversation or a consideration to be looked at.
Does industrial zoned land impact residential home values? If an industrial zoning was expanded towards residential areas, how, in your professional opinion, does that impact?
That's two questions.
Sorry.
Fine. Again, I just
No,
always
no.
explained, she didn't know which one to answer. Your first question was, does industrial affect residential property values? That's just yes or no.
That's
Or
easy for you.
answer how you wish, if you would like to.
I was going to say,
elaborate on
that's easy for you to say.
Yeah.
Industrial land, and you're talking about just vacant land or improved property, or?
that.
So he's not here to answer your question. That's why I said just yes or no, or you don't know. We'll get there.
Let me help
We'll get
a
there.
little
We'll
bit.
get, Mr. Les, we'll get there. Just
Yep. Land that would be zoned for commercial or industrial use, does that affect residential home values?
It's possible. I would need more information.
So as industrial or commercial zone land moves out into residential areas, how does that impact those residential areas when that does happen?
How does it impact the value?
The values, yes, of those, the assessed value of the perceived assessed value of those homes.
Again, I think it would depend upon what type of industrial property you're talking about, because you've got everything from a landfill to any other type of industrial property. So I don't know that I can give you an opinion on that.
Have you specifically studied the impacts of what industrial sized solar projects have on residential land near them?
I have not.
Does Lee County have a land use plan that you're aware of?
A comprehensive land use plan, yes.
Does this county have a necessity to preserve prime farmland in the county?
You're kind of getting outside the scope of my experience, quite honestly, but yes, in the peripheral, it's my understanding that that's the basis for the comprehensive land use plan.
Can you explain a little bit of what PTEL, the acronym PTEL, stands for as it relates to taxing of school districts?
The acronym stands for the Property Tax Extension Limitation Law. You can see why we call it PTEL.
And how does that impact how a school district may tax as it relates to an SES? I don't know how to phrase this question. I'm not going in the right direction. Bear with me here. So if these school districts, in this case, were in the PTEL, how would this conversation go with the shifting of burden? Is that when it plays a part, the shifting of burden plays a part?
Yes, but it's not so much that it's a PTEL district as it is the taxing district at its statutory maximum rate limit. That's what determines the shifting burden or not. Because if they're at their statutory rate limit, as the example I spoke of earlier, you can't shift that burden onto other property tax payers because they're already paying the maximum rate. PTEL districts, if they're not at their maximum rate limits, it is possible that that can have that shifting burden impact. But to quantify that, a lot of other things need to go into that conversation or that formula.
Okay. I think that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Other interested parties by a raise of the hand? Yes, sir. Pick a mic in the middle rows and start with your name and what community you're from, and we'll go from there.
My name is Brian Herman. That's Brian with an I, Herman with 2 R's, 2 N's, Alto Township. You stated that the initial tax base between the wind farm and the solar was different. Why? Why are they so different?
Well, to be perfectly honest, the committee that I served on didn't think that it should be, but legislators thought different. So it really came down to what the legislators put on it.
That's all I have for now. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other folks in the room by raise of hand? Okay, we'll turn to Zoomers. Zoom people, if you have a question, go to the, in your video conferencing, go to the bottom of your screen. You'll see an icon for participants. Click on that with your arrow. Up should pop a few options. One of them is raise hand, hit raise hand, and we'll see your hand on the screen here in the old Lee County Courthouse. If you're teleconferencing, in other words, you're just listening to us on the phone, or I suppose you're video conferencing on the phone, probably the same thing applies. Go to your keypad and hit *9, and that will raise your hand and we'll see that. Give you 10 seconds here to wind your way through that. All right, I don't see any hands, and you may step down, Ms. Ryerson.
Judge, we would rest at this time.
Okay, the petitioner is indicating they are finished producing their evidence. That brings us to other parties wishing to produce evidence. First would be, let's see, Mr. Boonstra, you're the lawyer for the ZBA, so you don't have any position to produce evidence. However, Ms. Duffy, you do. Do you have any witnesses? Okay. That you received in your office? Okay, go ahead and hand it out. And and it's a few hundred pages. I'll bet. Yes. We'll leave it right on your desk there. And ZBA members, should you wish to take a look at it, I'm sure you're free during business hours to come up to Ms. or anybody else. I'm sure you're free to come up to Ms. Duffy's office and take a look-see. If you want a copy of it, you can figure out a way to pay Ms. Duffy for it and to run hundreds of pages through the copy machine. I'll mark that, Ms. Duffy, ZO number 1. And it is admitted. Anything else, Ms. Duffy? Okay, ZBA, you're not allowed to produce any evidence. So that turns us to interested parties. Are there any interested parties in the room who have witnesses other than themselves? Raise your hand. Other than yourself, other than him or herself. Okay, how about on Zoom? Any folks have a witness other than yourself? Raise your hand, just to indicate that you do. Give you 10 seconds again to wind your way through the technology. All right, seeing none, now we'll turn to folks, interested parties who want to testify themselves in the room. Sounds like Hamilton, doesn't it? In the room where it happened. Folks wishing to testify themselves, if you'd raise your hand, please. Okay, Terry, you want to step up and raise your right hand, please? Find a comfortable spot for yourself to raise your hand, and that's fine. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Great. Have a seat up here next to me, and I'll help you get started. Watch your step. All right. Now, like I said, I'll help you get started.
Thank you.
State your name.
My name is Terry Voidik, V as in Victor, O-I-T-I-K.
And I'm going to give you a hint because of the technology in here. You almost got to swallow the
I know.
microphone. It just is not very sensitive, and you got to get your lips right up next to it. No, I want people in here to be able to hear her. They can't hear her. So
I'll
if you
do the
get right up
best I
next to it,
can.
there we go.
I don't want to get too many germs either.
I understand. I understand. Nobody's been on that microphone for 48 hours. What community do you live in?
I live in Lee, the village of Lee.
All right. And
My address is 390.
you don't have
Erickson-
to tell your address
Oh,
if you don't
okay.
want to.
I
That's
don't
fine.
mind.
Okay.
Erickson Gate, Lee, Illinois,
Okay.
60530. I'm
And would you
basically
spell your, let me help you out here. Would you spell your last name for the?
V as in Victor, O-I-T-I-K.
Thank you. And what's your background generally? What occupation do
Well,
you have or did you have?
I am a retired RN. I specialized in a lot of different things. I specialized in cardiac, hospice, pediatrics, medically fragile infants. I worked for the Hartford. I worked for Cigna as a well nurse, which was prevention of illness, and a myriad of other things. I was a liaison for Medicare rehab admissions. My real interest, though, and I was a former docent for Fermilab. I also served fine dining at Fermilab. They have a restaurant there. That's my post-retirement jobs. And, but my big passion is actually the environment. And I've served on many, many boards, and I'll just go through some of them. I was appointed by the mayor of Aurora to the mayor's sustainability committee. I am a member of the Big Woods. I was a member of the Big Woods Marmion group, which was sponsored by the city. Again, it's another citizen advocate group. And I was the environmental and quality of life chair. I've been president of my homeowners association, 144 units for 8 years, and where I turned a community that was almost bankrupt into a balanced budget, plus we created a green community. I was the steward for the DuPage County. Actually, I volunteered for the DuPage County Forest Preserve for 40 years. However, the last 8 or 9 years, I was the steward for the Big Woods Forest Preserve. So I managed a 500-acre forest preserve and did woodland restoration and prairie restoration. I was a member of the Sierra Club for 20 years. Until I moved here, was with the Valley of the Fox group. I guess this is a different group, and I've only been here 120 days, so I have not connected yet. but at that time I was a past chair, past lobby chairman, and also the past political chair. I served on the Fermilab Citizens International, the International Linear Collider Citizens Task Force, and I also served several years with the Citizens Advisory for Fermilab. And I think that's about it.
Okay, thank you. And do you have some particular facts you want to relate?
I do.
To the
And
ZBA? Let me finish to the ZBA. And let's try and stick to facts, and you'll have a chance for a closing
Okay.
statement when that comes.
my main concern is the environment, but I also am concerned about the fiscal stability of the company. And I did some investigation, and I have some facts that the business is, Hexagon has been only there since 2016, really. And their projects have been very small up to date. This one is one of the largest in the state of Illinois, or in the United States, I'm sorry. And I'm just a little concerned about that.
Well, you can tell the board
okay.
your concerns later. Let's
Okay.
stick to facts.
My second fact that I'd like to put out there to the Zoning Board of Appeals and to the other interested parties is I reviewed part of the agreement, and I understand the setback per the ordinance. I also am aware that the ordinance was written not with a 25 square mile solar farm in mind, but basically about smaller solar farms and home solar. So the 300-foot setback that they're granting is really, to me, okay. So my
See,
concern
that's the
is-
difference. Let's
yeah,
stick to
I'll
facts.
stick to the facts. Okay. The setback, as agreed, is 300 feet. I also viewed the document, and it did not bring into consideration the carve out that was agreed to with the Village of Lee. So my next fact that I have to bring forward is we have no do-overs on this. Once it's done, this is prime farmland. This is some of the most beautiful land that I've ever seen. I moved here because I did want the corn stalk and things like that for my neighbors. So I went out and I found that we do not in the United States have best practices for solar farms. However, the United Kingdom, the UK does have them. And I'm going to go ahead and give there just a list of, I have a fact sheet for the entire board. However, I would like to just give the facts of what the commitments are, and if they would kindly review them when they see the fact sheet, and also go on and find the rest of the document. But the commitment one will be, we'll focus on non-agricultural land or land which is of lower agricultural value. Commitment two, we will be sensitive to nationally and locally protected landscapes and nature conservation areas. Fact number three in best practices will be, we will minimize visual impact when possible and maintain appropriate screening throughout the lifetime of the project, managed through a land management or ecology plan. Commitment four, we will engage with the community in advance of submitting a planning application. Commitment five, we will encourage land diversification by proposing continued agricultural use or incorporating biodiversity measures within our projects. Commitment six would be to do as much buying and employing locally as possible. Commitment seven is we will act considerably during construction and demonstrate solar stewardship of the land. Commitment eight, we will seek the support of the local community and listen to their views and suggestions. We commit to commitment nine, we commit to using the solar farm as an educational opportunity where appropriate, where children can come and learn about alternative renewable energy. Commitment 10, at the end of the project life, we will return the land to its former use. The lay of the land, I don't know how many of you know, but the panels are rather tall, but Lee has some of the most beautiful agricultural land, and our elevation is 938 feet compared to the surrounding areas. Berms and landscapes may not effectively shield the panels. For comparison, note that Sublet is at 927, Stewart is 823, Nashua is 791, Dixon is 712 feet above sea level, Aurora is 600 feet, and Chicago is 597. So this is some of, I'll stick to the facts. Per the commitments and the best practices, is really not advisable to put solar fields on hillsides where you see them for miles around. It is much more advisable to choose flat sites that are screened by hedges and other. Landscape.
That's a speech you can,
Okay.
which you can give,
All right.
but remember,
Okay.
this
All
is,
right. I am trying.
I know,
I've never done this before in this format.
no, it still doesn't relieve
No,
the,
no, please, just.
got it.
Aviation, I know that I'll stick to the, we have crop dusters as well as student pilots that are frequently flying over our fields. And according to the FAA, solar panels can cause a potential hazard in the form of glare. Also, per some of the things that I have found out regarding wildlife, there is a particular solar panel that does have a pattern in it that does not confuse waterfowl. Lighting. There is, and I believe that we've already discussed this with Mr. Hexagon, is that all lighting should be focused down, but should also be, there is a certification called International Dark Sky Approved Lighting. And if you go online, you can see that outdoor lighting fixtures should be sky friendly. Again, I cite in my fact sheet for you. The 25,000 that is to be given to the village of Lee. When I look to see what the average solar farm makes, according to what the facts that I found or the information that I found, 155 million is what and I may be wrong, is what a solar farm can expect to make in gross profits. So $25,000, I'm concerned about whether or not that's a fair amount. That's it for me. I hope that I gave you some information.
Is that the end of your testimony then?
Yeah,
Okay.
that's.
You may inquire, Ms. Kennedy?
Thank you, Judge. Ms. Boydick, you testified that you performed an investigation of the company's financials. Can you go into detail what that investigation was?
I can tell you that they have not been in business very long. It concerns me that most of the projects have not even been completed yet. They have a lot of 2 and 4 megawatts. There hasn't been, I don't even think there is a 600 megawatt in the United States. I might be wrong, but it certainly would make sense that they would start out smaller. And my concern is their financial stability as well as the business acumen.
Let me back up. So the company did not ever provide to you a balance sheet of assets?
No.
Did you analyze any other financial statement from the company or related
No.
to the company?
No, I did go to my financial advisor and asked him to check and look, and whether it's publicly traded, I don't think so. But he said there was very little out because it was relative. These are the words he used. It's a relatively new company.
And do you believe that because it's a new company, or at least newer in your mind, it should not be allowed to site a solar energy system in Lee County?
No, that's not true, because I do believe that they should be able to. I believe that they should be able to do it and prove that they are stable in small stages, and then build the entire.
You've mentioned a Village of Lee meeting. What meeting was that?
It was the meeting of September 12th. It was the village council was the monthly meeting.
And were you present at that meeting?
I was.
And at that meeting, the company agreed to provide a setback of more than 300 feet to the
Yes,
village.
yes. It was a verbal agreement and there was a vote on the original resolution, which was written by Hexagon. And the first vote did not go through. And as a matter of fact, I was the one who said, let's not throw this thing away. Why don't you guys go back to the kind of drawing table and start over? And the board got up and they went and spoke with Mr. Hansman and our board president. And they came up with a compromise that would have additional setbacks. That,
And that compromise was that the company would set back more than 300 feet
Yes.
from the village?
yes,
Are you aware that the map in Appendix D provides a 600-foot setback to the village of Lee?
what the village of Lee was hoping for.
Please
and-
just
and,
answer the question.
No, there was no specification as to how many feet.
But are you aware that the company or the project as proposed sets back 600 feet from the village of Lee?
No,
Are you aware that the company performed a SIGHAT, or what's known as the solar glare hazard analysis for the proposed project in the panels?
yes, yes,
And are you aware that that analysis returned that no glare was reported?
what it does is it's in conflict with the FAA has on their document.
And I'm just asking yes or no.
No,
I have nothing further.
All right, members of the ZBA, Mr. Hughes,
No question.
Mr. Forster, Mr. Burrow.
Yeah, I understand you, right? You live in the village of Lee,
I just moved here 120 days ago,
and you're in the city limits of the village?
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
village limits.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Bothy, Mr. Pratt, okay, Mr. Boonstra, Ms. Duffy. Interested parties in the room, questions of Ms. Wojtek? By raise of your hand. Seeing none, I turn to the Zoomers. Again, if you're video conferencing, go to participants, click raise hand and we'll see it. Teleconferencing, *9 and we'll see it. All right, seeing none, you may step down.
Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, yeah, you had some, you want an exhibit. Here you go. Let me mark them and I'll, oh, sure, sure. Thank you, Ms. Duffy. You got- Thank you, and I'll mark these for the record. Ooh, thank you. The top right corner, IP, which stands for Interested Party Number 1. I'll keep one, and if you'll give one to yourself, Kelly, and the board members, and Courtney, we're all set. I think we got enough. And IP1 is admitted. And I think out of fairness to everyone, will any other, no, we've gone through that. All right, we have reached the conclusion of the evidence. The next stage is arguments. out of fairness to everyone, we'll give a break and I did. Does anybody on Zoom want to, didn't I?
You did.
I think I did.
Yeah.
Okay, if I had questions. All right, anybody on Zoom, I'll make sure, because I forgot. Anybody on Zoom want to testify? And I apologize if I didn't ask this before. Raise your hand. I won't go through the litany again. I'll just give you 10 seconds. I don't see any. Do you else? Okay. But thank you. If I didn't say that before, thank you. All right. Out of fairness to everyone, we will take a break so we can start the next stage, which is closing arguments, public comment, closing statements, call it what you will. So we'll be back here real time. Don't pay attention to that clock on the courtroom wall. 8 o'clock. Look at your cell phone. 8 o'clock. Okay. Courtney, you can have, well, no, I better not. everybody. If you resume your positions, please. All right, as I've indicated, we've reached the next stage, which is closing arguments, public comment, closing statements. And with the burden, you may go first, Ms. Kennedy.
Thank you, Judge. First and foremost, I want to say thank you to all of the ZBA members, all representatives of the county and interested parties for your attention and for sticking with us through these last few nights of testimony. I think it's obvious that we meaning Stewart Creek Solar, wouldn't be here if we didn't believe that this project is going to be great for Lee County and this community. We believe that it's going to be a significant investment in Lee County and the community in a couple of different ways. First, through the jobs brought to the area. Next, through indirect, or what I like to call secondary benefits that flow to the local economy as a result of bringing more people to this area. Increased property tax revenue that the area and region will enjoy and benefit from, especially the schools, from having this project. And also the charitable organizations that the company has pledged to set up and donate to each year. It's my hope that through this hearing process, you've discerned that the real overarching goal of the company is to be a good neighbor and to be a good citizen of Lee County. And I believe that with a project of this magnitude, you can't be anything but a good citizen and resident of Lee County. I hope that this commitment is reflected in the fact that not only did the company, through its project, meet the ordinance requirements, but it also took those a few steps further. This is reflected in the fact that the company's commitment to reroute and reconfigure drainage tiles under the panels to decrease the likelihood that the drain tiles will be struck during construction, its commitment to replace damaged or weak drain tiles at the very onset of this project so that the drain tiles can withstand the next 35 years, its commitment to improving the drain tile system for both participating landowners, which also will in turn benefit adjacent non-participating landowners. The fact that the company engaged with SCI Engineering to discuss the project's impact to wildlife and wetlands and water bodies, and it's voluntarily setting back from those wetlands and wildlife corridors so as to minimize any impact to those areas. And lastly, the company's commitment to provide setbacks that far exceed those noted in the ordinance for solar energy systems. Throughout the last few evenings of testimony, hopefully you've gotten a good idea of who Hexagon is as a company, about how much work we have put into this project and in preparing the petition and application that are before you. And hopefully you'll see or have seen that we've taken the time to consult with top-tiered consultants to prepare the needed reports and input for our application. To summarize briefly, you've heard from Matt Hansman, founder and CEO of Hexagon Energy LLC, who talked about who Hexagon is, why it's interested in Lee County, the multiple occasions where the company on its own sent notices to adjacent landowners to generate discussion about this project, the numerous meetings hosted with the villages, townships, and schools that stand to benefit from the project itself, how it ensured that the appropriate legal notices were provided, and most importantly, what the Stewart Creek Solar Project looks like. You then heard from Tom Huddleston regarding the extensive measures that the company intends to take to preserve the existing drain tiles, improve broken, damaged, or weak drain tiles found, and how to reroute the drain tiles around the solar panels so as not to have any issues while the project is in operation. Mr. Huddleston also noted that he believes that the siting of a solar energy system on this farm ground will actually preserve and better our great farm ground here in Lee County. You next heard from Mike Lair, who described what construction for this project looks like and the precautions that will be taken by the company. He also testified as to the AMA requirements and the company's commitment to adhere to those requirements set forth in that AMA. You next heard from Scott Billings from SCI, who testified that despite the EcoCat consultation having been terminated with the Illinois Department of Natural Resources, the company retained SCI to evaluate the project site and to make certain recommendations and suggestions so that the project could reduce its impact to the environment. You then heard from Andrew Lyons from Cone Resnick, who conducted a pair sales analysis and looked at other solar farms situated in similar areas as Lee County. And while Mr. Lyons noted that while there are no solar farms of this magnitude in areas similarly situated to Lee County, Based upon the solar farms that he has studied and in his experience, he concluded that there will not be any negative impact to land values of the surrounding properties. And lastly, you've heard from Wendy Ryerson, who tonight testified as to the property taxes to be generated by the project, and who also dispelled certain fears about the concept of the shifting burden on taxpayers. Now we are at the point where we turn this process over to you, the ZBA, where you have the opportunity to take into account all the evidence that's been presented, either by way of oral testimony or through exhibits. I know that in your consideration, you will apply the requirements of section 10(2)(b), 2D of the Lee County Ordinance. Those are the 7 criteria that are applicable to all special uses, such as this one that's before you presently. I'd like to briefly go through each of them and discuss what evidence was presented that addresses each of these factors. The first factor is the effect the proposed special use will have on the character of the neighborhood. Here you've heard testimony that the project fits in with the ag use of the property. And as you know, the Lee County Ordinance for solar energy systems allows the siting of solar energy systems on agricultural land. I think it's important to note that the siting of an SES on agricultural land doesn't make it commercial or industrial. It remains agricultural. You've heard that there's existing turbines in the area, and we believe from the testimony heard from the company and its experts that the project will not have any negative impact on the character of the land. The next factor is the effect the proposed special use will have on the surrounding properties. Here again, we maintain that the project will not negatively impact surrounding properties. It does not threaten or encroach on any endangered or threatened species. The project will provide a better drainage system for both participating and non-participating landowners. It will provide a steady source of income for participating landowners, especially when crop prices, as we know, tend to rise and fall based upon factors that are out of control of most, if not all. The third factor is the effect the proposed special use will have on traffic conditions. You've heard testimony that the company will enter into a road use agreement as required with Lee County and the affected townships. You've heard what will go on during construction, which will certainly have some impact on traffic. Surely for a short period of time, there will be truck traffic related to this project. However, there will be no long-term traffic impact. In fact, we believe that traffic will actually decrease once the project is operational. The fourth factor is the effect the proposed special use will have on public utility facilities. Here, I believe that there has not been any evidence presented before you that there will not be any effect on public utilities. You've heard testimony from Matthew Hansman that when this project goes online, it will be a coordinated effort with PJM to prevent any sort of brownout that could potentially occur. So we would maintain that this project would not impact any public utility facility. The fifth factor is the effect the proposed special use will have upon any regional or environmental concerns. And again, you were presented with oral testimony and the report showing that the EcoCat came back with no further consultations required by the IDNR. The company still engaged with SCI Engineering because it wanted to be a good neighbor, and you heard testimony from SCI that the company is going to set back from wildlife corridors and wetlands. The sixth factor is, will the special use be completed in compliance with the rules, regulations, and standards that in this case would be applicable to solar energy systems? First and foremost, in our mind, is ensuring that we comply with federal, state, and local construction, deconstruction, decommissioning, and environmental criteria. And that's why so much work went into preparing the petition and application before you. The company and my office ensured that not only are these boxes checked, so to speak, but that we went above and beyond those requirements. Lastly, looking to the requirements set forth in the Lee County Ordinance for solar energy systems, we meet each and every requirement. You've heard this through testimony, and if you look to the language of the application itself, you will see that the company has addressed each requirement line by line and how we meet it. The seventh and final factor for your consideration relates to other matters pertaining to the public health, safety, and general welfare. Here you've heard from SCI, who testified about the great lengths the company went to for environmental issues. Again, you heard from Tom Huddleston, reaffirming that the company is taking the extra steps to ensure proper drainage and also to improve the drainage. You also heard from Mr. Huddleston that the soil health and integrity will be improved over time because the soil is allowed to rest. Here in my mind, we're taking great Lee County soil and we're making it even better. You've heard testimony as to the setbacks that the company is voluntarily undertaking. You've heard about the economic impacts to the county, participating landowners, and community benefits. You've also heard testimony that we don't believe that there will be any interference with television and radio stations. To that end, after considering the evidence and testimony presented to each of these aforementioned factors, it is my hope that you, the Zoning Board of Appeals, will recommend this petition and the project to the Lee County Board. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, interested parties. Let's start with the room. Anyone in the room want to give a closing argument, public comment by raise of your hand? Okay, Ms. Vadick, if you will do me the favor, please, of there's two microphones in the middle aisle back there. If you'll just pick one and you can start from there. Yeah. Oh, yeah. You don't understand. The microphone feeds into the Zoom, and there's people that are harder of hearing than others, and I won't identify them, but we all know who you are.
Can you hear me?
No, a little closer.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, that's great.
I feel like I'm in a commercial.
Sort of feels like it, doesn't it?
It does sort of.
And you are Terry Voidick,
Yes,
and you live in
Lee, Illinois.
Thank you. All right, go ahead.
And I just basically, to end this whole thing, I'm not opposed to, as a matter of fact, I mentioned that I was the lobby chair for the Sierra Club and Valley of the Fox. I did lobby for your clean energy. I saw my senators and my representatives. I visited them every year. So I'm not opposed at all to your project. The size of it does scare me. One of the things that scares me is that I moved out here. I've only been here 120 days. And I look up at the night sky and I cannot believe what I can see. And I do appreciate, can I address it to also to the board? I do appreciate.
Well, you're addressing the board right now.
Okay. And I do appreciate that Hexagon is going to focus their lights downward. However, as you do the agreement or the approval, if you can have the following conditions, one of them would be that they do this, the lights are actually International Dark Sky approved and not just LEDs that flash down. Hold on, I just want to go through my paperwork. Some of the things I'm asking for. Can I ask Mr. Hansman a question at all? Okay. I don't know.
Sorry, that time's over.
Okay. Well, I couldn't hear the day that the environmental person was here, so I missed that question about an ESI. Okay. I just want to make sure I ask the right questions because, so the wildlife corridors, I do want to say that the wildlife corridors are very important and that they do stick with the plan and the commitment to preserve the wetlands and the wildlife. Another one that I would like to really ask for on this from the board to make as a condition would be that I know that the panels are being made in Canada. That's my understanding. And there is a special panel that the waterfowl that migrate, no matter how non-reflective the panel is, if it doesn't have a certain pattern in it, they will mistake it for water and they will land. And the problem is they can't get off the ground because they need that running start across the water. So if you would request that they actually do use that pattern panel that the waterfowl can navigate without mistaking for water. Of course, Matt and his company are aware. I believe that we've talked about the 10 commitments for solar best practices. I think they are making a good effort. If we can get berms or some sort of native shrubs that would shield the panels from the homes that are going to be impacted. That's one of the things that I would like to ask for. Another one would be the money that's going to the city of the village of Lee and the village, and is Stewart a village or a city? Okay, if we can up that just a little bit more, based on what the profits will be, not that they aren't entitled to make profit, but if they can give a bit of a fairer amount, they're going to impact our traffic, there's going to be dust, there's going to be noise, there's going to be, I do think even though we are not directed, it's not in the village of Lee or in the village of Stewart, I think those villages need more money. I'm proposing that you ask for 100,000 for the foundation per village. The setbacks. Setback should be just a little bit more. I know that you talked about the 300 feet. That 300 feet is actually specific to the smaller farms. There was never, I don't think when the ordinance was created, that at any time did they ever think that there would be a 25 square mile solar farm. The setbacks, I don't think it's fair to come into a community and surround a farmhouse on all four sides with solar panels and not think that you need to either have a larger setback. I personally think 1,000 feet is more appropriate, but whatever it is, if you can ask for the appropriate shielding, berms, native shrubs, whatever you can get that would stop the visual impact. I think that's all I have.
Okay, thank you. Any other folks in the room?
May I end with something? May I just?
Oh, I thought you said that's all you had. Sure, go ahead.
Okay. I just want to say that when I moved here from Aurora, I lived near the outlet mall and the development was just out of control. And so I looked for the most empty spot on the planet, which was Lee, Illinois. I don't know if anybody's been to Lee, but it is vacant and it's wonderful. And I would go out and have my coffee in the morning and it was so quiet. And I came across a quote and I kind of enhanced it. And I just want you all to think about this. To love the stars, the sky, and the oceans, to love anything is only a problem if you know that love is in danger. And right now, some of that love is in danger. The dark skies, the wildlife. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. No, please, let's refrain from approvals or disapprovals. You know that. Sir, come on up. Pick a microphone.
Lauren Guasto Stewart. I'm not a good speaker, so bear with me. I moved to this community seven years ago. I found this nice piece of property. It's only 1 acre, but when I looked at this property, I sat on the back porch before I bought it, and I can see for miles, and I love it there. And that's the reason I bought this. It's not because of the house. I grew up in Boone County, northern Boone County, which is rural. I grew up there as a kid, and over the years, the residential started moving in, and it just changed everything. This isn't the same, but this is going to definitely change the way the back of my, the view is, and it's, unfortunate. I talked to several people in the area. I'd say I talked to over 40 people in this area. They do not want this thing. And it's a hot potato issue. If you put it here, these people don't want it. If you put it here, these people don't want it. You know, I don't know what to do. You've already got the wind turbines, and here comes the solar panels to feed Chicago's hunger for electricity. And what do they do? They come and they dump their trash out here, you know, and that's what's going on. Big industry taking over. You know, and also this Andrew, our lines for Cohen Resnick, I don't think he really met the burden of you know, land values. You know, the project this size are basically out in California in the desert. You know, the other thing is there's no shortage of farmers wanting to farm this land. You know, I don't think there's any shortage of farmers wanting to buy this farmland. You know, and I'm going to thank Matthew and Will. They did approach me and asked me if I had any concerns. And, you know, I think they realize that this zoning thing for these solar farms, this whatever we call it, is inadequate. So they did work with us and give us more, and I thank you guys for that. So I'm pretty much done.
All right, thank you. Any other folks in the room? Yes, sir.
My name is Brian Herman with Alto Township. I'm actually on the board of trustees there. We turned it down 3-1 with the supervisor abstaining. I've lived in my house 25 years. If I wanted to wake up in the morning and see windows, I'd live in the city. I don't think that anybody's thought about 5,000 acres of under glass and the water that they're talking about running. If they wanted to build a 300-acre parking lot, there'd have to be a whole change in the retaining ponds and all this. That water coming off those solar panels isn't gonna soak in places. When it's in a hill and it all comes off and it lines up, it's gonna run down, it's gonna cut a rut, it's gonna wash, it's gonna erode. I don't care what kind of grass you put there. My father grew up, was born and raised miles south of where I live. I understand the whole tax base, but one of the school districts, most of it is in a different county even. So yeah, they're gonna be all for it or whatever, because they're gonna get the money and don't have any of the repercussions. Stewart school system itself is in the black. It's not in the red, in dire need of running out. I'm not saying it can't use the money. That's not what I'm saying. But nobody has any resources to tell us on what a 600 megawatt farm is going to do, because there's only 1 or 2 out there and they're in the desert. They don't get 30 inches of rain. There's nobody around them. This is all new to everybody. We've already got 5,000 acres that's going to be under glass in the county already, but it's not built, so we don't have any statistics. We don't know. Nothing personal against solar farms. In certain areas, yeah. How much would you have made this last 2 weeks? Not very much, not much sun. I just don't think this is the proper area for it. I know I had some more, but I was running late and left my notes at home, but thank you for your time.
Thank you. Anybody else in the room? Mr. Luz.
It is amazing with your comment that a tremendous amount of the taxes are going to be exported based on the use of our land in our county. And they're going to shift over to Ogle County. It's amazing. It's amazing, Lee County, what we're doing. Everyone's concern is ultimately that solar does not meet the aesthetic of agriculture. We're supposed to be approving things that would attempt to meet the aesthetic, and there's nothing about it that does. There's a 6-foot chain link fence and barbed wire around the whole entire perimeter of 5,000 acres. There's not one person that's going to drive down I-39 and see that and say, geez, I want to go live there. I want to go look, I want to go buy a house next to that. As we cover more of the county, more segments, people are going to drive by, and it's going to be neat. It's going to be like, wow, look at what they did. Unbelievable. Glad I'm driving by. Glad I'm driving through. It's neat to see. I'm out. Everyone's talked about, including this company, that the ordinance is inadequate in this county. And I went to one of the meetings here in the county a month ago, and I believe that falls on perhaps your all's shoulder, and I hope we shouldn't be sitting here with the inadequate ordinance that we have right now. We should have paused, and we should have corrected the ordinance. We should put more thought into it. We should be looking at neutral sources to look at the stormwater runoff, to really do a thorough environmental impact study, not just a tabletop version of it. We'll check all these boxes later, right? I mean, I coined that phrase perhaps last. We didn't see anything that was really done leading up to this. We're just going to approve it and hope that everything gets done later before the building permits. There's no visual impact study. All these residents that are here, there's nothing shrub-wise that was presented to be around these homes. They did improve setbacks, which is remarkable on this project when we came through what we just did. People come out to the country like this gentleman over here. He bought the house not because of the house, but because of his view. When people like that are coming to our county and Conan Resnick sits there and tells me that there's no impact on residential property values, he would not be here. And I bet there's thousands more like him. Conan Resnick's study does not apply. It should be scribbled up and thrown in the garbage. There are people that have refuted, and there's documents that I can get my hands on, but that study should be continued longer. He should look at larger solar and bring that. To say that there's no impact is ridiculous. $2,900 acres of grade A farmland. Top, best of the best. We can look at this project as a whole and say, oh, it's Class B. I'm okay, right, Mr. Pratt? I'm okay with Class B. But Class A, I've held in the past on protecting that. It's 2,900 acres of Class A. It barely goes below Class A as a whole. It should be voted down. We should find better places for it. We should be wiser as a human race and find better places to deploy solar. It's not agricultural use. It's the exact same as a bionuclear plant. It's the exact same as a coal plant. It's energy production. It's industrial land use. It's commercial. The fact that this industry has lobbied and said, and I've heard it clarified time and time again, that it is agricultural, has nothing to do with agriculture. We should find better places for it. And we should. I understand energy is needed. Electricity. We need a lot more generation, but we should think smarter about how we're deploying the technology. It's a complete different use of the lands. The wind, we still are able to use the land. With solar, we're done. It just sits idle. Maybe not on this one. Maybe not on the next one. But with the 5th one, the 6th one, 7th one, when are we gonna finally recognize when we add these acres up, when I tell you every project of Class A soil that we're taking out of production, when do we start actually taking heed in that? When do we start taking it seriously? Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? I think we've run through interested parties in the room. No, we do this, you get one chance like I announced at the beginning. All right, Zoomers who would like to give a closing statement or public comment, raise your hand. I'll give you time to get your mouse in gear or your fingers if you're a touchpad person. I can't quite crane my necks far enough. Alice, if you see somebody. Give you a few more seconds, folks. All right. That concludes public comment, closing arguments, closing statements, and that is the end of public participation in the process. I will therefore recess this hearing until Wednesday, November 4th, here at the old Lee County Courthouse, 7 o'clock, at which time the ZBA will begin its fact-finding and recommendation process. There will be, because of the COVID spike and the governor's restrictions, a little change. I'm sure you all suspect, I think we won't be able to have any interested parties in this room, and we'll work on the rest of it. Thank heavens Lee County's got such a good IT department that we will be able to, people will be at least able to view it on YouTube, if not otherwise. So, all right, everybody have a good one. Keep the snow away for a while. Not the moisture, right, but the snow. All right, be safe, be healthy.